Well, Alexander, thank you Thank you, and also thank you, Alexander, for the great introduction. It's much appreciated. Yes, so I would like to keep this this event as much of a dialogue as possible. So again, feel free to shout out any questions. Before we start, I think we have to fix some technical difficulties here. Yeah. No, we did a test run. We did a test run, but when you actually do it, unplug cable, replug. Yeah. So before we start, thanks for your support here. Before we start, I'd like to learn a little bit about the audience. So what we have here, who I'm talking to and dealing with. So what are you studying? Just for example, architecture. Other architects here? Future architects. Okay. Other studies? Mechanical engineering. Other mechanical engineers. Okay. Yeah. Okay. 3, 4 guys. Other things? Any computer science people here? Okay. Data science related analytics stuff. Okay, great. Just to know to whom I'm talking to. This is actually going to be a mix of things, because I'm on the one hand we'll try to take, let's say, Parkbob and what we do at Parkbob as an example. So I'll go a little bit into technologies that we use, just really on the surface side. But again, if you're interested, just feel free to ask. But also I'll share experience from the actual process of founding a company and developing the company over the time. So the company Parkbob is now 4 years old. We were founded in March 15. We're actually going to change the name soon, so it's not going to be called Parkbob in autumn. We don't know yet what the new name is going to be. Oh, thank you very much. Working now. Thank you. I'll try to give you like hands-on experience and learnings. I've included 4 of my main learnings so far, also in the presentation. You can take with a grain, let's say, with a grain of salt in terms of making them applicable to others, to our stories. Just before we start, who is thinking of founding a company himself? Okay, the majority. Wow, that's pretty amazing, because that's in Austria at least. Talking to students, usually a small minority, but it's great. So anyone already working on it, like in stealth mode, working on something? Yeah, everyone is. Good. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. All right, so let's dive in. So I had to set up a title, and I called it From Parking Spots to BioDrones and Back. So this might sound a little bit strange, right? What do parking spots have to do with BioDrones? But I'm going to come to that. So basically, we started in the year 2015. And the problem we were addressing, and that is part of your courses as well, right? You always start with the problem. What is the problem? Think about the problem. The problem we're addressing is one that most of us know. It has to do with mobility in urban environment, and it's about parking. So the actual spark for founding the company was based on a personal experience, like being with a family and a small kid, a small baby in the car, and we have to do long haul trips to Croatia and back and so on. And then you arrive on a Sunday evening at 8 p.m. in the 9th district, and you have to start looking for a parking spot for 50 minutes. Yeah? A baby cries in the background, blah, blah, blah. So I had those experiences so many times that with like 15 years of technology in my background and in my career, it was to me quite obvious that there needs to be a change. And I'm not talking about solving the problem, but just improving the problem a little bit would help millions and millions of people. Because this problem is not just in Vienna, it's in every city across the world. In some cities, it's even way worse that it's in Vienna, right? So public parking is a hassle. We all know it. It's regarding time. It actually costs a lot of money. That driving around pretty without making sense. And it's a huge burden on the cities because around about 25% of the traffic in the inner city is generated by cars that are just circling around looking for a parking spot. And it gets worse because you see all those white vans delivering Amazon parcels to you or your friends or whomever. And this is increasing dramatically at the moment. So the problem is increasing, and there are some mega trends adding to that. The first one is that urbanization as we know it is growing dramatically. More and more people want to live, have to live in cities. The growth is not so much happening in Europe, but Asia, Africa are growing dramatically. And on the other hand, the whole let's say technology is finding its way into cars. Like the number of connected cars is getting higher. The number of digital services you can consume in a connected car is getting higher. And there's this future vision of an autonomous car, which is fully digital, right? And obviously autonomous. It's going to take some time until those cars hit the streets, like in masses. But if you ever spend time in, let's say, California, for example, you see those cars already in reality, right? It's way more than a vision. This year at CES in Vegas, I used Lyft, so the Uber competitor, and I was driving an autonomous vehicle. They still had a person sitting there doing nothing, just making sure if something happens, but the car navigated completely autonomously. So all these trends add to the problem and will make it bigger and bigger. So what pains do we actually address by what we do, and at the starting point? So obviously finding a parking spot, that's pretty obvious, right? We know all about that. But if you talk to people on the street, what is the hassle related to it? It's not just finding a parking spot. It's also something that in Vienna we don't know, but in the rest of the world is paying with coins at a parking machine and having the right amount of coins in your pocket at the moment you need it, right? Being stressed out, oh, where is this parking machine, et cetera, et cetera. This is pretty much a hassle. And then sometimes, even if you put the right amount of coins into a parking machine, you're confronted with something like a parking fine, right? Because you parked on that parking spot that is reserved for residents. You didn't see it because the sign is hidden behind a tree, but nevertheless, parking fine on your car. In worst case, it's towed away. So you come back and the car is gone, right? So alone in Europe, we have 4 to 5 billion euros every year that people pay for parking fines. It's quite a lot of money. And at the end of the day, so 50% of those cases where people are fined is not because they know that it's not allowed and they risk it. It's 50% of cases they don't know. They don't know what the rules are in the city. They don't see the sign. They don't interpret it in the right way, et cetera, et cetera. So these are, let's say, the pain points that we address as a company. And we've solved 2 out of 3 of those pain points. So what we currently do is we serve 62 cities, to be precise, 15 in North America. The rest is scattered across Europe until Moscow. We're going to start to approach Asian cities in the second half of this year. And when I say we cover cities, is what we do there is we actually digitize all the space in terms of georeferencing the space that is assigned for parking or other mobility options. But we also digitize all the rules around it. Yeah? So if you imagine all those signs, all those in Vienna alone, we have, I think it's close to 20,000 parking signs with different things on there and stuff like that. So we digitize all those rules, and not just the explicit rules that are on a sign, but also the implicit rules that are written in the traffic code, in the Straßenverkehrsordnung, et cetera, et cetera. And we've done that basically for 160,000 kilometers of street length so far in those 62 cities. So that's a pretty big data set, as you can imagine. The whole solution is totally no hardware. Yeah? We started off thinking about doing hardware stuff, but we're now just really a data player, right? Mixing up the right amounts of data to make that happen. Let me step back 5 years from now, before the company was really founded, because I think that's also interesting to hear about the founder. Well, what was really the beginning, right? So the moment where there's nothing more like an idea that maybe you can put the idea on 2 pages of paper, and that's the starting point. And 4 years later, you have a company, 20 people being active in like 20 markets across the world, et cetera, et cetera. So what's the thing in between, and how does it all start? So obviously the problem with finding a parking spot was the main driver. So I didn't have necessarily the idea of starting a startup when I was seeing the problem. I was really interested about the problem itself. And I was puzzled that no one has thought about solutions for that. So I digged into technologies that would enable to do that. And one of those technologies is just hardware, right? It's sensors. So I don't know if you know these sensors. These are just things like this. And you drill a hole in the tarmac, you put them in. And then what it does, it's a magnetic sensor more or less, or a light sensor or a combination. It just recognizes when a car is on or off. And then it delivers that information to whatever infrastructure, right? The whole concept around this is that you need a lot of infrastructure in the city, because every little parking spot has to be drilled and that put that thing in, and how long does that hardware really survive when a snow plow, for example, in winter goes over it, et cetera, you need relay stations and gateways to upload that information and show the information, et cetera. So this approach is extremely cost heavy, right? If you want to deploy it in a city like Vienna, you're easily talking 50 to 100 million, which is the amount of money that cities usually do not have. So this is not really an option. The next approach that I was digging into was satellite-based. So at that time, 5 years ago, the availability of highly accurate satellite data was not there. And you were talking about 70 centimeter grade satellite data. And with that satellite stuff, you cannot identify cars. It's just not too granular enough, right? So also gone. The next option we digged into was using drones with cameras, obviously flying, yeah, which from a technical point of view totally works. But there's the legal side, because you're just not allowed to do that at the moment. 10 years from now, you'll see drones flying all around. Yeah, it will happen, but just not at the moment. So the weirdest thing, and that's why I talk about BioDrones. The weirdest thing that we investigated was actually replacing those technical drones with actual real drones, like animals, like birds. Because what we found is that, and this is not a joke, guys, this really exists. The US Coast Guards use pigeons to help them spot survivors in a shipwreck. So because pigeons have a 50 times better visual recognition than human beings have. So what they do, they put those pigeons in a bowl under a helicopter, and then they take the helicopter on the sea, and the pigeon is able to spot the person without swim vest across the entire horizon. It's an amazing capability. It's way better than any kind of technology at the moment can do. So they really use it in real life to spot like survivors from ship catastrophes. So so we were talking to pigeon trainers and stuff, and the interesting thing was so to really equip them with a small harness, which those exist for competition purposes and stuff, and to have them recognize, to let them collect data, right? So the good thing was pigeons can do it. So we did it, we trained them, and they were totally following the route you were basically telling them. They were collecting data like crazy. It's an amazing thing. The bad thing is they're too smart. So after 3 days, they lose interest because it's too boring, and then they start to do other stuff, which makes it not really a candidate for being used, right? So this is obviously a very exotic thing, but it just shows you all the different things that we've tried out and tested that could lead to something. And then basically what happened is that I ended up doing something that I did years before, working with mobile technology for a number of companies, and what the whole idea was around, okay, how can we actually measure what's happening in a city and cars parking and stuff like that? And as you know, what you need to do is obviously sensors, right? You need a lot of sensors. You can put them in the street, or you can use the sensors that we all carry around with us, and it's that thing, right? Standard smartphone has around about 15 sensors, different kinds of sensors. There's an accelerometer, there's a gyroscope in there, there's a barometer in there, blah, 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 blah. So what we did is we basically created a machine learning algorithm that can detect let's say, the pattern, the sensor pattern that is associated to a car parking in and to a car parking out. And we trained that machine learning algorithm with using actually 3 sensors of the device, and it worked. We had a detection rate of 95%. So 95% of cases, if you have your smartphone in your pocket and you're in a car and driving in or parking in, parking out, the phone is able to recognize that. Yeah? If you just train the machine learning algorithm good enough. If you want to know what algorithm it is, it's a support vector machine. Maybe it rings the bell with some of you guys. That's what you use as a core. So that worked, and obviously the whole idea behind that was, okay, we have about 1.5 million smartphones in Vienna. People just carry them around every time. 95% of cases, a person driving a car has a smartphone with him. So if you can use that, we can measure people parking in, parking out. So it's more or less a network of sensors. And the problem at that stage was, okay, how do you manage to get to the phones of the users, right? I mean, you need a lot of phones, a lot of users to contribute. And acquiring thousands and thousands of users is a tricky thing. So that was the starting point, actually, where we started to work with Telekom Austria. They have a service called Handyparken. Some of you might know because you pay your parking tickets with that service. And we cross-integrated that service, our service, into their service, basically, and combined it into a value-add service for users. Because maybe someone has seen that. What we do is basically, whenever you park somewhere, we check in the background what rule applies to the parking space, and if you're in risk of getting a ticket or being towed away, we automatically send you a message and say, hey, Christian, this is reserved for residents. And yes, it also applies on a Sunday morning. So that's how we managed to basically get out to around about 300,000 smartphones in Vienna, and we're able to collect a massive amount of data. One question that I can already take in, what about privacy? We have no idea. We follow the privacy by design principle, maybe a term that some of you might know, which is you build a system in a way that you do not ever get personal data into your system. So we from the beginning we tried to stay away from any kind of personal data. We have no idea who that is. We have no idea what car it is. We know nothing. Yeah? And we prefer to know nothing. Which all that we want to know is that at that point in time, someone took the car from here and drove away. Because at that moment, the parking spot got available, right? And then we can show this parking spot to other users as an available parking spot. So that's basically, that was the starting point, and that was the very first version of the application. That we took, that we got out. This is super old. It shows just available parking spot. The green one's very likely to be available. The red one, already like 15 minutes old, maybe not available. And that was what we got out. So now you'd imagine, okay, this is a fantastic service. All people will jump on it and use it. And we waited, and we had downloads, but we did not get any kind of feedback. So there were some downloads, but we were expecting more. So was there a problem? Maybe. We didn't know. Thing was, we didn't get any kind of feedback from the users. Yeah, why they wouldn't use it, or why they would use it, or what's prohibiting them from using it, etc., etc., etc. So we were kind of stuck. We developed this, and now we didn't know what to improve. So that was one of the learnings for us, that basically feedback in a digital world, feedback is way harder to get. But it's way more important, because if you don't know how you serve the customer and where exactly you're creating value or not creating value, you can't improve, right? So that was for us the starting point where we started to actually involve our users in the whole process. So we started the term co-creation, a little bit of a co-creation approach, and invited all of our users, but some of our users to join us. And huh?
Hopefully not all users.
No, that at that point. We had like 7,000, 8,000 at that time. And we invited some and had a very lively discussion. And okay, guys, what do you really need? What do you really want? What works? What doesn't work? Etc. Etc. And we continued to do this to really to be able to improve. And one thing that came up and that we didn't know at that point in time was that the people told us, hey, it's great that you show the parking spot be available. And I drove there, and yes, it was available, and I parked there. And then I saw this sign telling me I'm not allowed to park here because it's reserved for a disabled person. And we were like, okay, that's the fair point. And another user had a similar experience telling us, okay, like he did this twice and got to an available parking spot, was super happy, but then again, totally frustrated because he discovered he's not allowed to park there at the very moment. So we learned from that exercise, from that feedback sessions we had, that it's not enough to show where available parking spots are. You also need the information on all the rules and restrictions that apply on that parking spot. And then if you can just show the spots where people are allowed to park at the very moment, you have an improved service, right? So there's a learning around that also. So we were totally focused on the solution in terms of the technologies to help people to find a parking spot, and not so much about the problem. We forgot a little bit in the very beginning to really understand what the problems are of the users. And this is an extremely common mistake, I have to say. Like 80–90% of startups do that. It's just too common because it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that you identify the problem and then you totally solution-focused, right? Which, especially as you're trained from a technical point of view, that's exactly what you learn years to do that, right? So it's quite self-explaining why that happens. But nevertheless, if I give a piece of advice to people, then it's really about take the time to really go deep what the problem is and talk to the people that are affected. That will easily save you 1–2 years of a learning curve. In our case, I wouldn't say we didn't lose it, but it took us a year, more or less, to realize that. So as I said, the resulting service was an improved one, and we combined it with that parking warning message that you can see here. People park, they're not allowed, bam, they get a notification message. Hey, Chris, you're not allowed to park here. We also learned that people, in some cases, in the area they want to park, there is just no parking. There is no parking available. It's full, right? You can drive around for an hour, won't open up new parking spots. You have to be really lucky for that. But it would help people if they knew when they started thinking about, hey, where do I park now, if they already knew that it's completely full in the area. So what we derive there is what we call parking search time. Is we can tell people how long it will take them to find a parking spot in this area. And when it's like, let's say 40 minutes, you might want to give them a better option, which might be that parking garage over there, or just parking somewhere completely else and taking the tube or the bus or whatever. Yeah. So the that is very central of what we did there. The whole parking search time also showed us one thing, that and that the users, a lot of our users that used our service used a navigation service as a main service, right? They use Google Maps or something else. In a lot of cases, it's Google Maps. And some people, they already know the way to the destination, but they use Google Maps because they have the estimated arrival time. And they're warned of traffic jams and stuff like that. It's not just about navigation. It's really about information about the way. And they said, well, actually, you know, Christian, your service is great. I sometimes use it, but it's sometimes really tricky. I'm in the car, I'm driving, I use Google Maps, and then I have to take the phone, switch the application, or open a new application, take a look at the different map, then getting back to the navigation. So this is pretty awful. And what we learned from that is that our experience or our pieces of information we give to people has to be integrated directly with the navigation process, right? So if you have a navigation process or an information process around the journey, when you get close to your destination, then the information is helpful to say, hey, Christian, parking is going to be easy here. Shall I actually guide you to the next parking spot, right? That is something. But that, obviously, we don't do navigation. There are big players out there doing navigation. Are we going to compete with those guys? Most likely not. So that actually gets me to the third learning, that quite often someone else is closer to your customer than you are, in terms of owning the relationship or owning the experience you want to improve. And our conclusion out of that was cooperation. So that was the starting point where we started to talk all those companies who own the process. It was Google, there was TomTom, there was Here, and all the other players. And that was where also our business was kind of growing then dramatically, because these guys said, well, yes, we want to improve the experience. We don't know exactly how to do it. Obviously, you figure it out. Let's work together and let's create something together. So what came out of that is it's called last mile navigation, which basically you're on a journey, and while you're getting close to your destination, you get the right level of information. Hey, no parking available here. There's a parking garage nearby, or you're close by. Shall I navigate you to the actual parking spot that's available? Because no one wants to be navigated to the building, right? You know the experience. You're driving your car, and then you navigate it to Gusshausstraße 27, is it? And then you're in front of the building, and then it's like, okay, what now, right? So that's exactly the extension of the service that we do. So we work very closely with TomTom now. We have an ongoing relationship with the Google guys. They're tricky to work with. They never really tell you what they're up to. It's extremely secretive if you ever work with them. Here is also a main player. So the basically, based on that, we expanded a lot, and it was not just about let's say the parking spot and the rules and restrictions. What we did until then is expanding it for various use cases and dimensions. So one use case is really the parkable space, where we have an extensive data set, as I said, about where is that space that is designated. That's also helping cities, because cities want to reduce the parking space, because they want to make the cities greener, because they have to, because they need more space for scooters and stuff like that. This is why we're working with them. Rules and restrictions, obviously I've shown the value we can give. The service you've seen on a smartphone warning you is integrated into cars now. So in a year from now, when you drive a certain brand out there in Vienna, when you park, the car is going to tell you, hey, Christian, not a good idea to park here. Fleet efficiency, I'm gonna cover that. Yeah, availability or occupancy, it's pretty clear where you find a parking spot. Where we also digged into is the whole area of autonomous driving. So who used a car hailing service so far, like Uber or i²c? Yeah, good majority. So you all know the experience. So an Uber driver can decide to drop you off or pick you up at a position next to the street where in legal terms he's not allowed to do that. He's not allowed to pick you up or drop you off. And 80–90% of cases, it's illegal for him to do that. An autonomous vehicle, by definition, does not have the option to do something illegal. Autonomous vehicles have to be compliant with the traffic codes and with the rules of a city. So they need to know what those rules are. So they need someone telling them what those rules are, and that's actually we. Yeah? So we provide a so-called service layer that's called AV pickup drop-off layer that's helping autonomous fleets to know where it's allowed to drop off, pick up someone, to park for 5 minutes, half an hour, a full day, whatever. Yeah? Yeah, commercial delivery is a big topic. I mentioned those trucks at the beginning. It's just an anecdote, but a third of all parking fines and tow-away cases in New York City are generated by delivery trucks. Third. And it's millions and millions and millions of dollars we're talking about. So in the last 20 years, the cities have given the delivery operators like UPS and FedEx, DHL, and so on, huge discounts on those fines. And now they stopped it because they said, well, guys, you're creating all those traffic jams with your trucks. I won't give you any discounts anymore. So this is getting a real problem for those kind of companies. So we help them to make their logistic processes more efficient. Obviously bus and special permits, yeah, whole pricing and payment. The pricing schemes are getting dynamic. So the underlying principle is in a city of the future in 20 years, you will not see any signs. Those typical parking signs that you know now, they will be gone. There will be no need. Why? Because all those rules are going to be digital. And there's also going to be, let's say, temporal allocation of space. A space that can be made temporal and reserved for a disabled driver who needs to be really close to the destination, or for a Gewerbebetrieb, just parking, who wants to park there because he's to deliver something, etc., etc., etc. Right? And related to that is also the pricing, because at the moment that, for example, in Vienna, that everywhere in the city it costs the same if you park on the street is actually pretty, don't quote me, but stupid, because it does not reflect demand and supply in any kind of form, right? It's the same price in the first district than in let's say out there somewhere in the 23rd. It doesn't really make sense. Yeah, so that's basically what we do at the moment, and this is also part of a bigger trend at the moment. It's what's happening in mobility. So some of the principles that we see in the market, autonomous driving, it will happen. It will take some time because it's before it's mass market, but it will happen, and it will change a lot. It will totally change the user behavior of how we deal with mobility. Also in combination with the micro-mobility revolution that's also happening right now, right? All those, we have, I think, 8 or 9 providers now for scooters in the city. I think 12,000 scooters around, and it will get more. And it already changes the mobility behavior of people. It replaces public transports in a lot of cases, etc. And with that, the business models are changing. It's a lot about shared mobility versus ownership. People in, I was tempted to say in our age, but in your age, are not so fixed anymore of having a car and owning a car, right? 20 years ago, it was a big status symbol. For some, it's still, but generally the trend goes away from that. So it's, I'm totally fine just having access to mobility and to a car when I need it. Yeah. So, and also the car will get a digital services platform. So what happened to this thing 15 years ago, like before it was a mobile telephone, it was a mobile phone. And all that you did is like calling and maybe texting. But now what this is a digital services platform. The majority of money and business that is done is on top of the device. The device itself is just a platform. But what's happened on top of the device is making the world a little bit way more and more different. So the same thing is happening with car and with mobility at the moment. Yeah, I'm gonna jump over that. So as I said before, our core markets are Europe and North America. North America is a strong driver of our business. At the moment, we're doing 80% of our revenues come from the United States. There's a reason for that. We've been one of the first actually doing that, what we do, also in the US. And secondly, US companies tend to be way faster. That's just a matter of fact, also in decision processes. That's why we're expanding them there heavily. So one thing was mentioned, the Amazon Corporation. So in 14 days, there's going to be a new device launched, which is called Echo Auto. Who has an Amazon device, like an Echo device? Ooh, a Google competition device, Google Assistant. Freaky things, yeah. They listen to you all the time. Yeah. Yeah, but basically we've developed together with Amazon one of the core services for that device. Again, it's of course parking related, and it's live in the largest 15 U.S. cities now. And we're kind of proud of that. So a little bit about the technology. You've seen a similar image. So what we finally ended up doing is we work with satellite imagery. So we have a close cooperation with ESA, the European Space Agency, but also with Digital Globe, which is the main American satellite provider. And we now have access to 30 centimeter grade satellite imagery. So 1 pixel is 30 centimeters. It's pretty accurate. That's the stuff you see on Google Maps and where you see swimming pools and dogs sitting to the swimming pools. It's the real stuff. Where you can actually pretty well extract cars. And when you can extract cars, which this is just basically a showcase on how we do the extraction, you can see where the space is, where cars really park. You can identify the density, you can identify availability, and over time, having those snapshots, you can develop the models that basically help you then doing this. Before the question comes up, no, this is not real time. It would be lovely to have it real time. There are real-time satellites out there. But this is military only. So the Intel guys have access to that. But commercially, 30 centimeter is the best thing you can have. What we also do is a lot of image recognition and object recognition from street-level cameras like this, where we develop the algorithms to actually identify, oh, there's a parking sign. What does it say? We read it, and we compare it with the data in our background. Oh my God, there's been a change. There's something else now written on that sign. So we can basically update our databases. Identifying entryways where you cannot park. This is very American, the curbside. So they color the curb in different colors so you know what the rule is, so that you don't have to spend money on the signs and stuff like that. This is basic stuff that we do. There's a lot of algorithmic related to it, because this is an example of, I think this is New York City. You see the number of signs. It's going to take you 3 to 5 minutes to figure out whether you are actually allowed to park there on a Sunday morning. I tell you, it's a massive, because it's really a logical, I mean, you're technicians, you know how to do that, but it's a logical really process you have to go through. What we do is actually we codify those rules and make them available as rule engines. You can then apply to the various ifs and thens and that's. And one of the last sources is the crowd. So in a lot of cities that we have, we operate a crowd. and they help us to fill the gap. And we're a small company. We're 20 people based here in Vienna, and it's a challenge to work on LA, Phoenix, Seattle, where you've never been, and you see that you're missing information. So what we did is we're basically kind of hiring freelancers, some dozens, some hundreds, that run around with their smartphones and our application and then digitize certain bits and pieces that we're missing in the data. Yeah? The data that the cities have is so weak. The cities are really totally overwhelmed, and they don't even know what they don't even have an idea of the changes that they did. Because the construction department is doing something, and the geoinformation department has no clue about what they did. And so just to give you an example, in the city of Munich, and Munich is very well organized, it's a German city, but they have a good budget and stuff, but with the crowd, we were able to identify 10,000, let's say, mistakes or changes that they were not aware of. Yeah? So we collect that, and we basically deliver it to the city for free, just basically helping them establish a relationship. But yes, you would think the cities have that. A lot of them have open government databases, but the quality of the data is really weak. But that's why we exist, right? Otherwise, there won't really be the need. Yeah, I explained that already. Autonomous vehicles, I also basically explained that, how that works. Yeah, that's actually a bit outdated, but what are we as a team? And maybe I just talk for 2 minutes on how we got to that great team that we have. Because 4 years ago, I was alone with half of a developer. I mean, he was able to spend half of his time working on a project. And obviously, it's very tricky to do that with that kind of resource. And there wasn't much more of an idea and a concept there. I knew that I might need geoinformatic guys because we're dealing with geospatial data, and I had no clue how to deal with geospatial data. So I tried to get in touch with students from Professor Pfeiffer, I think he's in this building, blah, 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 and get interns in to start working on something. And it worked real well. And then basically the first, obviously, big milestone was getting a funding round in place. So the first funding round was 20,000 euros. And there was a huge change. That's not a lot of money if you take a look at it, but it's a huge amount of money in the very beginning if you start at zero. Because it enables you to hire 2 or 3 people for a limited amount of hours and to start building something, right? And to create those prototypes you need to be able to show that things work and stuff like that. And then we've grown a lot into a really, really interesting team where we're 60% female, which is pretty unique in that whole environment, and we're proud of it. And extremely tech savvy, so 85% have a technology background, all of them academic background. Most of them actually not the typical software developers, more like the geoinformatic geo guys from doing photogrammetry and remote sensing. Data scientists, obviously, who do all the modeling work, and 2.5 clowns trying to get the stuff to the people at the end of the day. So and that's, I think, the last learning, and finally it's in German. But that's one of the things that I really learned in those years, is that the idea as such is just 0.5% of success. The rest is really execution. And when it's about execution it's persistence, it's doing it again and again and again. As you've seen, we started with some kind of an idea, and we were sure that this is the thing, and on the go, it kind of transformed into something else, which is doing extremely well now and is successful. But 4 years ago, no, we didn't think that we did that kind of thing, right? So it's a lot about being able to keep flexible and adaptable, and obviously not giving up, because things don't work the way you expected. That's for sure. That's a common denominator. Yeah, that's also the reason why sometimes I'm asked, well, like, let's say, or sometimes I ask, or people approach me and want feedback on their idea, and then they try not to tell me what they plan to do, because they have the fear that I steal that idea. And as I said, it's not about idea. I won't steal ideas, but it's really about the execution, right? There are so many good ideas out there, but to really make it happen is the thing that counts. All right, so that was my part. Thank you. And now I'm very happy to address any kind of your questions. And one thing, it does not have to be directly related to the stuff that I presented, right?
What is the business model about it? Say, how do you make money?
Yeah. So we make money. We make money by providing our APIs, and that's the pipeline, so the data, as a service to the automotive and mobility world. So our customers are the OEMs, which are the car manufacturers, typically, and the closest customer there is BMW, Daimler, Renault, Nissan, those guys. The supply chain of the automotive world, which is the tier ones like Bosch, Conti, and obviously the whole navigation world and map world, like TomTom and HERE. So this is the one side of the business, like really the automotive economy. The second piece is a little bit different. So we work a lot with this new breed of mobility providers, like Car2Go, DriveNow, Tier, the scooter providers, Lime, Bird, and companies that shape the new world of mobility. And this is interesting. That, so what we do for them is, again, provide our services. For example, we help ReachNow in the United States to lower their parking fines and tollway fees they face as a car sharing provider. And they pay us, for business model wise, just that you know that they pay us a certain service fee per vehicle per month. Yeah? That's the typical business model we operate. We're now doing something else for them because we discovered that their fleets are, take a car sharing fleet. Take DriveNow and Car2Go. They're merging now together in Vienna also, right? You have 1,500 cars in the city. What happens is that people use them and park them in areas where there is no demand. Like they put them in the 18th district, and then there is no demand there for the next 2 or 3 days. So the car sits there. And this is lost money because no one can use it, right? So what we do is, with all our algorithms, we detected where we can predict very accurately where demand will be for shared mobility. And then we have the crowd, if you remember, we have a lot of people on ground, which then can move those cars from low demand to high demand areas. And what happens then is that the fleet is used 50, 60, 70% more. And it leads to an increase of revenue with our customers, and we take a cut of that additional revenue. Yeah? To put it simply, we make the shared mobility available where people need them. Does that answer your question? What?
Oh, yeah. When did you approach these customers? Like you must have had already a good algorithm, lots of data to approach them, because otherwise it wouldn't be interesting for them, right?
It's a tricky thing. There is one method that's called act as if. So, well, in the beginning you have not, or you don't have a lot, right? And you definitely don't qualify to work with those kind of companies. So you have a core, and you're at least if you're convinced enough that what you have and a little bit of extra you can build into the thing, then you can approach a company and sell it to them. And a lot of them learned now that it's totally fine just doing a proof of concept, a trial, in a limited, let's say, environment and limited complexity, but just proving the case that generally this works, right? And then you can build on that. But of course, it's always a little bit of, let's say, overselling or giving them the vision of what this could be, and then being able to deliver while you're working with them. Yeah. But no, we approached those companies at day zero. And I don't have a background in automotive and mobility. When I stepped into this, I had zero contacts in the industry, zero. But the starting point was flying to Web Summit in Lisbon, in Dublin at that time, and just having a booth the size like this. It's not a joke. And just trying to reach out to people who have something to do with what you do. And by chance, I met the CTO of Car2Go there, and we had a really good chat. And he invited me to Stuttgart next week, and there was a partnership, right? And then you start to work from that, because then you tell the next customer or the potential customer that, hey, Car2Go is already working with us. Let's talk. And then it builds. Ich muss kurz,
my question is also somehow related to the previous two. How did you finance yourself at the beginning in the Pigeon times? Because I mean at that point you didn't really have like closed partnerships, did you? And how did you survive back then?
So before founding the company, I had a normal job. I had my full-time job, more than full-time, and I worked weekends and nights while having a baby. So it was not a good timing, but well, if you're really into something, it just happens anyway, right? There was like 9 months or so where we were just putting a lot of effort into creating concept testing things, et cetera, and then it was clear, if you really want to do it, then you need some money. You need to hire people. Yeah, I had a friend. I had actually a friend of mine who did the first development for 500 euros, cash on hand, right? Worth, if you want to buy it from a development company, it's going to be worth 10,000. But he just did it in the nights as well, and he got some money for it. So that enabled me to have a prototype, and that prototype enabled me to go to business angels, and basically it was a lot of presentations and pitches with business angels. Where at a certain point, the business angel Niki Futta said, well, I like the idea, let's talk more. And then 3 weeks later, I was sitting with 2 additional business angels, and we signed the first funding round, which I just mentioned. And then there was some money, and then you never get like big money at the beginning. You just get a small piece to just enable you to take the next step and show what you can do. And then you get a little bit more to take another step, and it's constant. You're constantly driven by that. So we're, to answer your question now, like on a formal side, we are venture capital funded. Yeah.
I've got the mic. First of all, thank you very much for this interesting talk. And the question is, how did you really manage to build all this amazing stuff with like 4 software developers and 2 data scientists, right? Basically, like on the execution side, what is the secret sauce?
That's a good question. No, it really is, because I never asked that before. I think the essence is a lot. It's passion. Get people on board who are passionate about what they do, and also are able to think about what they're developing, and contribute to that on a product level. And the second thing is focus, I would say. So at the beginning, we were just focusing on one very specific problem. And being able to focus, to put, if you put 5 people on a very specific problem, there is a lot of outcome. And at the beginning, the good thing is you don't have any overhead. You have one room, you have a bunch of laptops, and you don't care about the rest, right? So you can really work in an extremely efficient way. And to be honest, in the first year, what we produced in the first year with 5 people was so much in comparison to running a normal company, right? From the output side, yeah. It may be a wishy-washy answer to your question, but that's the way it is. And of course, it's constantly trying to get more funds in place, more money in place, because you never have enough people. That's the life of a startup, and it's healthy. You always have to fear the pain, to feel the pain that one more software developer and everything would go better, and one more this is kind of typical. Yeah.
What gave you the confidence in the early days and still now that big players like Google did not just copy your idea because they already had a lot of data and were closer to that solution maybe?
Yes, totally. I don't have the confidence. I don't know. Google is very special. Google can copy more or less everything. But you don't know. It's a probability game, I would say. So how likely is it that they do this? And how to put it? What are the things that you can do better than Google does? And there are things that small companies can do way better than Google does. They have, excuse my language, shitload of money and shitload of resource. For example, that local, to take the effort to interpret local parking regulations in Mannheim and Bologna and whatever, this is really deep groundwork. And that's something that's very tricky for even a Google to do. So they try to do the parking rules digitalization, like the codification of rules, and they assigned it to 200 people in Hyderabad, where their whole map team is sitting with 4,000 people, and they quit after 4 months or so because those guys were not able to understand the rules in Mannheim. Yeah, was an example. But if they want, they can do it. No question about that, right? Is it likely, and are you able to gain, let's say, or to build something that is already so significant that they might think of not copying it, but actually just taking it. But Google, you never know. You never know what they're doing. And most likely there is a concept about what you're thinking and you're thinking in Google's desk. That's quite likely. But hey, I mean, if you worry about that, you're not gonna start anything, right? Yeah.
Actually, a different question, but now a follow-up to this question. You mentioned on one of the slides with the satellite images, you were talking about patent pending. So do you have any special IP algorithms, anything that's also protected that would stop anyone from copying you? Yeah. And the original question actually was, you have quite an interesting shareholder structure that you are still the main shareholder as the founder by a big part. But you have, I think, 8 or 9 other shareholders. Yeah. Is this a lot of headache, or does it take a lot of time handling that? Yeah. Because I've sat in some shareholder meetings which were not so fun, and those were fewer people.
Okay, 2 questions. First one, IP. Yes, we try to protect core IP of our technologies. That's for sure. We have 3 patents pending at the moment. They were all positive from the patent office, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to continue to do that. So in, I don't know, 2 years, we're going to have around about 10 patents, roughly. Is it going to protect us? Most likely not. The dynamics of technology in that area is so high that, and especially big guys like Google, they can kind of circumvent. They can build what you built without that very specific component that is patentable. It's tricky. So, like 10 years ago, patents were super important, and more important than now. In the United States, they still are more important, I would say. It's good to have them because it's an asset base. It's not as easy to copy, but is it really defendable in terms of, yeah, I'm going to sue Google? Maybe not. Yeah. But of course, in combination with, let's say, other players, other startups who do the similar thing as you do and stuff like that, it helps. So yes, we continue to protect our IP. Second question was about shareholder structure. Yes, so this is actually quite typical. We're 4 years old now. We have like 9 parties in the cap table, so shareholders. This is more or less normal. I know companies who have like 15 or 16. Is it a headache? For us, me personally, I can only speak for myself. No, it's not. We were very lucky, and I think we got lucky in selecting the people we work with. And an investor is something you work with at the end of the day. They let us more or less do what we want. As long as they have the feeling that we're going in the right direction and we're not doing like really stupid things, they let you work in peace. Yeah. If you start to do really stupid things, and if it goes like down for a longer period of time, then it can get hard. Then the nicest persons will get really a pain in your neck because it's their money, you know. I get it. But so far, no. This is something that's I see the investors and the business angels way more as support, and there's been hard times as well where they really were support, also emotionally support in terms of, hey, Christian, you know, I know it's hard for you to know, but you know, I've seen that 10 times already. It happens. Don't worry, just do what you do, continue. That also happens, right? And that's a good thing. Will that stay the same? Maybe not. Maybe in a year or two, when we're doing like larger funding rounds, we're gonna consolidate the existing ones, and yeah. But that's the natural way.
Did you already break even? And if yes, at what point? And how much money did you burn from the beginning to that point?
We
roughly?
burned, yes, good question. We burned until now 3.2 million euros. Sounds like a lot, right?
Like in what time and which period?
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah. Where did all the money go? Oh, I mean, if you grow the team, it's 90% people. I mean, it's all people. Yeah? And to do some things, you need people like the 60 cities and stuff like that. We also built assets with that money, right? Break even? No, absolutely not. The break even thing is something you are always confronted in Austria and in Germany with that question. It's really interesting because in the United States, if I would be break even, no investor would ever invest me. Ever. Being break even after 3-4 years is a very bad sign. It just shows that you're not taking enough risks. Because with that money or with the effort you spend into getting break even and trying to hustle customers to get more money in, you could have taken all that money and effort and put it into getting a bigger market share, developing the product further, etc., etc. So this is the American way. In Europe, it's mixed. We have a good trend in terms of narrowing the gap. Yes, so we have strong growing revenues. When do we plan to be break even? That's going to be somewhere around 2021. But if we're really successful, that will be later. Because when we grow fast enough, which means in this sense it means successful, we will need more money, which means we will burn more money and so on and so on.
And what was then so far your maximum burn rate per month, roughly? Just to have an idea.
That was November last year, because June, November in Austria is always the thing. It was around 150 or 160. That's a lot. It's a lot. It's especially a lot if that was not the case in this sense, but it's especially a lot if you know the number on your bank account. Yeah. And you know you can't do that like for a very long period of time. Right? Also, one question might come up, like, what's the runway? Okay, you're all aware of this. So what's the typical runway? In the beginning, the first 2 years, our runway was between 3 and 6 months. That's just the way that you got. The good thing is that you get used to that. So you, well, you at a certain point you just stop worrying because you can't change it, right? But that's totally normal. To be in a comfortable position, to have be funded for 1.5 years or 2 years. There are exceptions. Biotech, big exception. Super deep tech technology, also an exception. Those things are funded for a longer period of time. But for other cases, it's the runway. Wie hast du schon, zu wenig zum Überleben, zu viel zum Sterben? Yeah. That's what it is. Yeah.
How do you develop your company's priorities? Like, which direction you're going to go? You have some regular, idea shower meetings or something? Or, how does it work in practice?
That's a constant process. We have a strong leadership team, 5 people. We sit together 2 or 3 times a week for various dimensions of the business, and there's always bits and pieces of information which already make you think about moving the steering wheel a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. So this is kind of happening as you go. You need, of course, those kind of checkpoints, which happen on a monthly or quarterly basis, where you then take your time and sit together and think about the bigger things and what this really means now, and cut off something, for example, a product that doesn't really work, to say, okay, let's stop now. We can continue to do this but those things, but it's related to any kind of decision that you take, right? If you hire someone, you already have to think about the competencies that might be required in 3, 6, 9 months. Also the requirements you have right now, but that might change because you get a new customer in place who needs a little bit something different or whatever, and then the flavor of the competencies of that person might also change with that information. So it's hard to explain. It happens on the go, and I try to put this really on a leadership team level, like those 5 people steering this and setting those priorities, and stopping me sometimes from being too far in the future. Yeah. Does this answer your question? Yeah.
How much of the company were you giving away each investment round, especially in the beginning?
The first funding round was 140. I gave away roughly 15% of the company. Then there were 2.5 more of those funding rounds happening. So typically you would think about between 20 and 25% for a decent kind of funding round. With a business angel in the beginning, it might be a little bit different. Special terms, special situation, blah, blah. But typically it's 20, 25%. Yeah. So, and that's normal. And that's something that, if you go the route of venture capital, then that's something you just have to accept. That's the deal. Most likely there won't be an exception just for you. And because you have that very special product, most likely not going to happen. I know very successful companies like Series B level funding. They get a funding round of, let's say, 20, 30 million. The 3 founders own 20% of the company. But of a company that already grew pretty big and is worth a lot, right? So that puts things in perspective. Yeah. Yeah. And as I said, it's not going to get a problem that you only own 20%, as long as you have a good relationship with your investors. You select them and they have to fit to you. Then most likely it's not going to create too much conflict.
Any more questions?
I was wondering about those pigeons.
Yeah.
Tell me more. How did you find somebody to train them, and just how
Vienna-
did it play out?
Vienna, if you don't know, but Vienna has a huge tradition in pigeon training. Vienna was one of the capitals of Zuchttauben before they got those like flying rats. Because 200 years ago, or 150 years ago, there were very few like the typical rats, flying rats we see now. But pigeons were the let's say a poor man's luxury, and they had a lot of contests and competitions with pigeons on specially trained Flüge. So they had to do special shows with pigeons, and that's why there is a special breed of pigeons who are treated as like high class, which is a die Wiener Hochzuchttaube. It's not a joke. Yeah, and so it actually was pretty easy to find someone dealing with that. Yeah.
So they trained up pictures of free parking spots? Or
Yeah, we wanted to train the pigeon to just fly a certain route, to just follow the street, for example. And with, let's say, that harness and a little camera on board, it would do that. Yeah. And they're so smart. I mean, they're so intelligent. It's amazing. It's amazing what they can do. As I said, they're too smart. They get bored. Just flying, just whatever you tell them. But yeah, it's amazing what they can do.
But why wouldn't be randomized flights?
Because they're flying really, they're so fast. They're really wild. There's footage on YouTube. You can take a look at. The camera is like totally wibble wobble. You won't be able to have any kind of algorithms run on that. You have to really ask the pigeon to fly steadily. Then it works. But if it just flies around randomly, it's really like very, very wild. Yeah. It's not the typical drone behavior.
Okay. I have one last question.
Yes.
You mentioned a lot of big names cooperating with big names. Are you actually cooperating with startups as well?
Yes, absolutely. We're cooperating with a number of small companies, and they do great stuff. Just one company is called PowerPlace. They're based in Berlin. They're 3.5 people, data scientists. They work on producing prediction algorithms for mobility based on point of information. So all the information you can get from OpenStreetMap, for example, like around here you have 3 bars and 5 cafes, and there's a density of blah, 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 living density, and then you can actually pretty much predict what the mobility demand is in that area. And then they cluster it and they blah, blah. So yes, we do work with those guys. But mainly on the supply side, yeah. Work with a small Hungarian company who's doing great stuff on the geoinformatics side and so on and so on. Yes.
Okay. So, are there any more questions? No? Okay. So, thank you very much for coming today. As always, there are drinks outside. I invite you to go and grab one and network a little bit more. And hope to see you next time. The next talk is next week when the managing director of N26 is coming. So I'm looking forward to